The world stopped breathing when the breaking news hit every screen. A beloved sports hero, once the pride of the nation, now exposed as the central figure in a shocking crime. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted, and chaos reigned in the streets. Fans screamed his name, some in anger, others in disbelief. His face, once on magazine covers, was now plastered across headlines dripping with scandal. Anchors declared betrayal that cut deeper than anyone imagined. Prosecutors whispered of hidden evidence, while teammates refused to answer calls. The truth was out, but nobody could grasp the full scale of the disaster. This wasn't gossip, this was devastation played out for the world to see. The courtroom gasped, the judge's gavel cracked, and the whispers turned into shouts. A life of triumph was unraveling in public, exposed under blinding lights. And the first chilling reveal was made clear. The adored athlete wasn't just caught in controversy. He was the beating heart of a crime so dark, it stunned the entire nation. The streets erupted as if the city itself had been betrayed. Fans clutched jerseys, ripping them apart in fury, while others fell to their knees, begging for answers. Outside the courthouse, microphones crowded the air, each journalist clawing for scraps of truth. "How could this happen?" one reporter cried, voice cracking as if speaking for an entire nation. The betrayal didn't just pierce loyalty, it shattered identity. This wasn't only about an athlete, it was about every dream built around him. The media swarmed like vultures, cameras clicking like gunfire. Inside, whispers echoed off marble halls as the accused remained hidden behind closed doors. Neighbors, former friends, even sponsors joined the speculation frenzy. What secrets were waiting to spill? The silence from the accused spoke louder than words. And in the heavy air, a truth burned. The world wasn't watching a scandal. It was watching the beginning of a nightmare that no one could escape. Every channel replayed the scandal in relentless loops. Old highlights of his greatest victories cut with breaking news banners like daggers through nostalgia. Fans at bars watched in silence, glasses untouched, as the star's glory turned to ash before their eyes. Commentators debated with fiery conviction, some defending, others condemning. "This isn't just an athlete's fall," one analyst shouted. "This is betrayal of an entire nation's trust." Social media raged like wildfire, hashtags trending globally, each post more vicious than the last. The nation was divided, torn between denial and rage, but all united in disbelief. Sponsors quietly erased his image from billboards, leaving empty spaces where greatness once stood. His empire, once untouchable, was crumbling in real time. And as every screen flickered with his downfall, one truth grew clear. The story wasn't fading, it was escalating with every second. The courthouse became a stage where whispers grew into roars. Inside, lawyers whispered urgently, their faces pale under fluorescent lights. A single question echoed: who betrayed the star, and why now? His attorney, sweating under pressure, muttered, "They've got something we can't bury." Outside, chants rose from the crowd, split between loyalty and fury. The gavel's echo still haunted the walls, each strike a reminder of a crumbling empire. The media didn't rest, their lenses hunting shadows, desperate for cracks in the defense. But behind the silence, evidence was mounting, ready to crush every lie. This wasn't trial by law alone. It was trial by nation, by history, by the very people who once cheered his name. And as the walls closed in, the certainty of his guilt grew heavier than the silence that surrounded him. The final blow of the opening chapter landed when the evidence surfaced. Leaked documents slid across desks, photographs spilled onto screens, and the truth bled out into the open. Every whisper became a scream. The crime wasn't rumor, it was fact. The athlete stood accused not of mistakes, but of orchestrating betrayal at the highest level. Fans screamed outside, "Tell us it's a lie," but the silence from the defense was deafening. Journalists swarmed like predators sensing blood, their voices merging into a wall of chaos. Sponsors fled, teammates cut ties, and even family members stayed silent. The gavel cracked once more, sealing the moment as history. And with it, The first undeniable reveal. Their hero wasn't caught in scandal by accident. He was the architect of his own ruin, and the world was now witness to his collapse. Before the fall, there was the rise, and it was glorious. In a small town where cracked asphalt lined forgotten courts, a boy dribbled a ball until his hands blistered. The echoes of his sneakers were louder than the silence of poverty. Coaches whispered of raw talent, a rare spark in a bleak corner. "He'll change everything," one mentor said, voice trembling with belief. Each match built his legend, from schoolyard battles to packed gymnasiums, sweat pouring like proof of destiny. His parents, worn from endless shifts, sat in the bleachers with pride stitched across tired faces. The roar of early crowds was intoxicating, a promise of something more. Reporters wrote of grit, of impossible plays, of a star born from nowhere. The world leaned in, ready to believe. That was the beginning, a chapter where hope outweighed doubt, and a nation was about to claim a hero who seemed unstoppable. The boy became a young man, and the stage grew brighter. College stadiums erupted at his name, banners unfurled like prophecy. Commentators called him a force of nature, unstoppable, unbreakable. Scouts circled like hawks, offering contracts and promises of wealth. He signed with trembling hands, heart pounding with disbelief. "This is your time," his coach said, gripping his shoulder like a father. The first game was magic. Every step electrified the crowd. Every score thundered louder than doubt. Fans painted their faces, chanting his name until voices cracked. Fame arrived like a flood, unstoppable, overwhelming, intoxicating. He smiled through it, carrying the weight as though it was a crown. The world had found its idol, and he had found his purpose. Yet hidden beneath the spotlight, the first shadows stirred, small cracks forming in the golden armor of a star too bright to fade. The endorsements came faster than the winds. His face beamed from billboards, shoes named in his honor, magazines branding him a symbol of excellence. "He is more than an athlete," one article declared. "He is culture." Fans waited outside hotels, chanting into the night for glimpses of their new idol. He waved, smiled, and sometimes whispered, "Thank you," though exhaustion gnawed at him. Private jets replaced buses, penthouses replaced motels, and every room overflowed with strangers promising loyalty. His charm became legend, every laugh replayed on late-night shows. Yet with every new contract, with every camera flash, he drifted further from the boy who dribbled on cracked asphalt. Admiration turned to obsession, adoration into pressure. In quiet moments, his reflection stared back at him with doubt, but the world never saw it. To them, he was perfection sculpted in flesh, untouchable, unforgettable. The spotlight never dimmed, not even at night. Parties stretched until dawn, champagne fountains reflecting off his diamond watch. Celebrities embraced him, producers begged for appearances, and politicians shook his hand for cameras. "You're the future," one executive said, eyes glittering with profit. Yet behind the applause, whispers brewed. His circle grew crowded with enablers, each feeding off his fame, none telling him no way. Lovers came and went, some leaving behind questions, others leaving scars. His smile for cameras hid a fatigue he couldn't escape. Success had trapped him in a cage made of gold, where the bars were invisible but unbreakable. And in those moments between cheers, when the world fell quiet, he felt it, the tug of something darker, the weight of secrets waiting to surface. The world adored him, but it was not love without shadows. A controlling lover whispered doubts into his ear, urging him to distrust his closest friends. A manager pushed contracts across tables, the fine print soaked with hidden traps. Family members leaned too hard on his wealth, their smiles masking hunger. Each betrayal was small, subtle, barely noticed in the flood of praise. "You can trust me," the lover insisted, their hand gripping his tighter than comfort allowed. He nodded, needing warmth, blind to the poison in the words. Fame had built him a throne, but around its legs, termites gnawed at the foundation. The cracks widened, but nobody spoke, nobody stopped him, not even himself. It was the beginning of the end, seeded in whispers, rooted in desperation, and masked by the blinding light of admiration. The shine wore thin as Marcus Cole jogged off the court to a chorus that felt colder than usual. He smiled for the cameras, but his eyes tracked the exit like a hunted thing. "Dylan Ruiz said, 'Press once 5 minutes,' and the words landed like a summons. Marcus nodded, playing the part, while dread gnawed the edges of his grin. In the tunnel, a reporter shouted a rumor about a secret debt, and the echo stung like a slap. Lena Hart said, "Ignore them, baby," but her grip on his arm was too tight to be comfort. The team walked past like ghosts who had signed silence. Marcus said, "One more win, and the noise will stop," as if repetition could drown truth. The hallway lights buzzed, harsh and endless, a crown of fluorescent thorns. Flashbulbs burst like little arrests, each a record of doubt. In the locker room, the air smelled of bleach and fear, and his pulse set the tempo. He sat before his open locker and stared at the nameplate that once felt like armor. The chant outside rose, then faltered, like a tide that had found a wall. The morning brought headlines that moved like knives. A tabloid splashed a grainy photo of Marcus outside a private club, and the caption screamed debt and danger. Jared King said, "Tell me this is garbage," and his voice carried the weight of shared seasons. Marcus said, "It is garbage," but the room heard the pause and filed it. Agents called, sponsors called, and every call asked if the myth still sold. Lena paced the balcony and watched the street like a lookout. Dylan said, "We can get ahead of this," and opened a folder heavy with spin. Marcus said, "I can fix this on the court," as if points could pay off secrets. The coffee went cold. The clock went loud, and silence settled like dust on gold. A text from an unknown number arrived with a single word: "Tonight, Dick die." He closed the phone as if it could bite. The city outside kept humming, polite and hungry. The club photo bred cousins, and by noon there were 10 more angles. Paparazzi installed themselves like furniture outside the gym. A microphone brushed Marcus like a nettle as he stepped from the car. A voice asked about a cash courier and a late night in a back room. "Nip." Marcus said, "No comment," and the phrase tasted like rust. Ava Patel said, "We are examining financial patterns on live TV," and the world learned to say investigation. Dylan said, "We need transparency," but meant control. Jared kept his distance, and distance became rumor. Lena said, "You owe no one your truth," and the sentence felt like a lock clicking shut. Practice ran long, heavy with missed cues and shallow breaths. The coach watched and said nothing. When Marcus checked his locker, a manila envelope waited like a patient threat. Inside lay a ledger copy and a sticky note that read, "Stop before you drown." The circle cracked along old seams. A friend from the early days sold a story about a locker room debt and a favor gone wrong. Marcus read it and felt the floor lean. Dylan said, "We can sue," but his eyes did the math and lost. Sponsors pulled meetings into quiet rooms and spoke of values like accountants speak of losses. Lena said, "Cut them off before they cut you," and her voice wore armor. Jared texted, "Call me," then unsent it, an absence louder than a shout. Ava appeared again and said, "If there is cooperation, there will be consideration," and the word consideration glowed like false mercy. Marcus paced the penthouse and counted the exits. The city below threw its lights at the glass like coins, at a wish that had expired. He said, "I did not cheat the game," and the room did not answer. The envelope lay open on the table, and the numbers stared back like odds. Rain began with the kind of patience that promised a flood. Marcus stood alone on the balcony and listened to the city dissolve. His phone vibrated on the table like a heart outside a chest. Naomi Brooks said, "I saw something I cannot unsee," and her voice trembled through the speaker. He said, "Who is this?" though he knew the name from staff lists and holidays. She said, "They used your charity to move money," and the syllables hit like a fall from a height. Marcus said, Tell me exactly what you saw, while the sky stitched lightning between towers. Naomi said, there are recordings and ledgers and a room under the office, and fear made her words clip and race. He closed his eyes and saw headlines writing themselves. Lena stepped into the doorway and watched without blinking. The call ended, and the rain turned hard and sure. And then, one night, the phone call came, and nothing was the same again. Morning broke with a warrant and a knock that did not wait for courtesy. Ava Patel said, we need your records, and the room seemed to lose oxygen. Marcus said, you can search everything, though dread slid behind his ribs. Boxes came down from shelves like confessions learning to walk. Dylan Ruiz said, we will cooperate, and watched the agents photograph a locked drawer. Naomi Brooks arrived with eyes that refused to look away. She said, the ledgers are not the whole truth, and the floor tilted. A storage key lay where no key should be, inside a charity brochure. Ava said, interesting, and the word thudded like a door. The hallway filled with plastic gloves and low radios. Marcus said, this is a misunderstanding, and the syllables felt brittle. They opened the drawer, and the envelope inside wore fingerprints that were not his. The city moved outside, indifferent, relentless, ready for another headline. The clock on the wall clicked, steady as judgment. The twist did not arrive with thunder. It arrived as a signature. Ava laid two contracts side by side, and the names rhymed like a bad joke. Lena Hart said, that is not mine, but the ink had her loop and the dates had her nights. Marcus said, tell me you did not touch the charity, and his voice frayed on the last word. Lena said, I protected us, and the word us fell like a blade. Dylan stared at the margins and found the payments that fed old debts. Ava said, shell accounts mirrored invoices, a perfect shadow, and turned each page like a lesson. Naomi whispered, I told you there was more, and pressed a drive into a bag. The walls narrowed until breathing felt like a decision. Marcus said, how long? And Lena refused the math. The room, once a throne room, became a witness box. Silence followed, heavy as proof. Memory opened like a trapdoor and showed the hidden staircase. A gala 2 years ago where flashbulbs made everyone holy. Lena said smile for the donors while a back room counted cash. A midnight meeting where a fixer praised the foundation's reach. Dylan said, one sponsorship to cover a favor, and no one called it what it was. A bank officer toasted success with a handshake that lingered. Naomi watched invoices double in price. When cameras left, Jared King said, this crowd is not our crowd, and laughter buried the warning. Marcus said, we help people, and believed the sentence because belief was required. The cover-ups were tidy, each mistake dressed as virtue. Security logs blurred, signatures mirrored, and a hallway lens looked the wrong way. The past was not fog after all. It had edges, receipts, and rooms without windows. The public learned truth in waves that knocked breath from the shore. News crawls mapped the charity into a pipeline that did not carry hope. Ava said, we will present charges, and the microphones leaned in like hungry birds. Sponsors issued statements dressed as apologies to themselves. Jared King said, I cannot defend this, and the distance became official. Marcus said, this is bigger than me, and the phrase tasted like a final admission. Lena called an attorney who answered before the first ring. Dylan said, we must separate accounts, and knew it was late. Naomi's testimony hit the feed, careful, steady, impossible to dismiss. The story grew teeth. Organized money, silent partners, civic doors opened by a famous smile. Cameras loved the pattern more than the person. The map on the screen looked like a bruise. When the noise faded, understanding arrived with cruel clarity. Marcus stood in the quiet office that felt borrowed now. He touched the trophy that had once weighed like triumph. He said, I built a life on trust, and heard how thin the word had become. Lena watched from the doorway and did not cross the threshold. She said, I did it for us. And the echo answered her with nothing. Dylan stared at the skyline and counted the losses no ledger could hold. Naomi closed a binder and exhaled like someone leaving a funeral. Ava said, "There is still the truth to tell," and that was the only mercy available. The life he loved was scaffolding around a hollow room. The mask was not ripped off. It simply fell. He saw the shape beneath and did not look away. Dawn scraped the sky as the elevator doors opened to a corridor lined with badges. Marcus said, "Let me walk," and the cuffs clicked anyway. Ava Patel said, "You are under arrest," and the words carried a winter calm. Cameras flared, hungry as wolves, chewing light from his face. Dylan Ruiz said, "Do not speak," and swallowed the rest of his courage. Lena Hart stood by the glass, eyes dry as stone, and did not step forward. Naomi Brooks said, "Tell the truth," and folded her shaking hands. The building hummed like a machine that had learned his name. Marcus said, "I never sold the game," and felt the sentence weigh less than air. The corridor stretched, cold with cleaned marble and colder judgments. A door opened on a room that smelled of toner and rain. Someone read charges that tacked like nails on wood. The pen waited for signatures that changed everything. The city began its day, and his ended. Arraignment moved like clockwork sharpened to a blade. The clerk recited, and the room mocked each word like a tally. Marcus said, "Not guilty," and the vowels sounded borrowed. The judge watched with eyes that had seen 1,000 falls. Ava said, "Flight risk is real," and laid out a map of doors he might run through. Dylan said, "He will comply," and set a stack of letters on the rail. Naomi met his gaze, steady as a bridge, and nodded once. Lena said, "Hold your head," and the whisper felt like an order. Jared King sat in the second row and did not blink. The gavel measured time like a metronome for ruin. Bail numbers rose and settled with a thud. A date was set that ate the calendar. Marcus turned, and the gallery turned away. The hallway swallowed him, cuffs under a coat that did not warm. Trial began with a camera flash that felt like thunder indoors. Jury faces formed a new horizon he could not read. Ava said, "Follow the money," and threads lit up across the screen. Naomi said, "I logged the transfers," and her voice did not shake. Dylan rose and said, "Misinterpretation is not malice," and fed reason to a furnace. Exhibits marched past like soldiers trained to accuse. Marcus said, "I trusted the wrong hands," and the sentence bent under weight. Lena's texts appeared, clipped and bright as broken glass. Jared testified about the locker room silence, and silence filled the court again. The charity logo hovered on each monitor like a taunt. Numbers stacked into towers taller than doubt. The gallery leaned forward, craving collapse. The day ended, but the story did not blink. Outside, the rain had stopped, and the stains remained. Cross-examination sliced where loyalty had once lived. Dylan said, "Did you enrich yourself?" And the answer curved like a blade returning. Ava said, "Intent hides in patterns," and put up a calendar that glowed with alignment. Naomi pointed to timestamps that fit like teeth. Marcus said, "I signed to help," and the air thinned. Lena watched her own messages under oath and did not blink. The judge said, "Proceed," and the room obeyed gravity. A security clip played, a door that opened at midnight. Jared said, "I warned him," and the words sounded like a prayer that had failed. The jury wrote notes with faces that hid their notes. Money moved on arrows that never missed their mark. The gallery sighed like a tired sea. Dylan gathered papers that felt like snow in a storm. The clock hand spun, finding only later. Verdict day tasted like metal before the words came. The jury foreperson stood, a page trembling in steady hands. Marcus said, "Whatever it is, I take it," and meant the sentence in ways no law could measure. Ava looked forward, still as a drawn string. Dylan said, "We preserved grounds, though the ground had already fallen." Naomi clasped her hands and whispered, "Let the truth land." Lena fixed her gaze on nothing and found it everywhere. The foreperson read guilt where hope had tried to live. The room exhaled, a sound like paper tearing slow. The judge spoke of custody, restitution, and time that would not return. Cameras erupted outside like a storm that had learned rhythm. Marcus closed his eyes and saw the court as a court sees him. The gavel fell, and every headline wrote itself. The verdict was not the end. It was only the beginning of her ruin. The mansion sounded different when the voices left. Air moved through bare rooms like a tired ghost. Marcus said, "Take the trophies," and the movers nodded without meeting his eyes. The wall where his first jersey hung wore a square of bright, dustless paint. Naomi said, "There are shelters your grants once kept open," and the sentence landed like a mirror. He said, "What did I keep open for myself?" And no one answered. A drone buzzed outside the gate, recording the exit of a life. Bouncers called to confirm the retrieval of framed ads, glossy memories boxed like returns. The team issued a line about standards and distance grew legs. Lena texted, "Handle your time with dignity," and silence followed like a period. Marcus walked the hallway and counted echoes that no camera could sell. Friends learned to be former. Invitations evaporated faster than headlines. Jared King said, "I hope you find a way to serve more than yourself," then stepped off the call. Marcus said, "I hear you," and heard how small he sounded. His sister sent a wire for their mother's medicine and left the message unread. The neighborhood group thread ejected him like a splinter. Lena met a reporter in a quiet booth and negotiated absence as if it were gold. Naomi said, "Community hours can begin with restitution ledgers," and placed a plan on the table. He said, "I still know how to work," and the truth surprised him. Night fell early, as if the house had asked for less sky. Somewhere, a fan folded a jersey, and grief learned to sit still. Confession arrived without ceremony. Dylan Ruiz said, "I knew the shortcuts and pretended they were roads," and the room held its breath. Marcus said, "You kept me winning," and heard how warped the praise had become. Dylan said, "I kept you moving past the questions," and set a signed statement down like a brick. The document named vendors, dates, and a habit of approval that wore his initials. Marcus said, "I signed because I wanted belief to be simple." Dylan said, "You signed because it was easy." The air between them felt like old tape, stretched and thin. Naomi watched both men and wrote the next steps without pity. Outside, a siren wandered the block and faded. Dylan said, "I will testify to my part," and the admission made the floor steadier. Marcus closed his eyes and let the weight land. Justice does not celebrate, it tallies. Ava Patel worked late beneath a lamp that made islands of paper. She said, "Close the loop on the silent partners," and the junior nodded like a metronome. A threat email blinked and joined a folder already full of echoes. 1. She said, "Fear is a tax we pay for telling the truth," and kept typing. Naomi's deposition sat atop the stack, a calm voice captured in ink. Marcus's statement lived below, uneven lines from a hand relearning weight. Ava thought of mentors who warned that fame buys delay, not absolution. The city outside forgot and remembered in cycles, but the record stayed. She closed the file and touched its spine like a guard touches a gate. Glock said late in a language every case learns. Somewhere, a victim slept a little easier. That was enough. Days learn new edges inside concrete schedules. Marcus swept a gym floor in a county facility and counted the scuffs like miles. He said, "I was built to run," and pushed the broom until the thought lost heat. A chaplain said, "Service can be a door," and left a paperback beside the bench. Letters arrived from kids who still loved the crossover more than the scandal. Naomi wrote, "Your restitution funded the clinic reopening," and the line softened his grip. He pressed a palm to his chest and felt a rhythm he did not chase. Lena sent nothing, and the quiet felt honest. Dylan's testimony posted to the docket, blunt as winter. Ava filed the last motion and left the courthouse to a clean horizon. Marcus said, I will not be the headline they keep, and meant it. In the hush, resolve sounded like work. The gates opened on a sky the color of iron, and Marcus walked out with no bag, no crowd, only the sound of shoes on gravel. A reporter said, "Do you have a statement?" And the silence answered harder than words. Naomi stood near the curb, offering a nod instead of applause. Dylan said, "You will always carry this," and his voice carried regret without defense. Ava said, "Your sentence is done, not your debt," and the truth bent the morning air. Lena was absent, her shadow replaced by memory. Marcus said, "I am not here to be forgiven," and kept moving past microphones. Cameras zoomed, hungry for his face, but he turned his head to the horizon. A child across the street waved a jersey, its fabric faded, its belief intact. He raised a hand, not high, not triumphant, only human. The sky held its silence. The news cycle feasted again, this time with images of release. Anchors replayed his steps through the gates, slowing the silence into drama. A panelist said, "Some stories never die," and the screen filled with divided opinions. Sponsors confirmed there would be no welcome back. Jared King said, "I hope he learns what the game meant," and the statement carried both wound and farewell. Naomi said, "He gave years to the court, now give him time for penance," and the clip trended in the quiet corner of compassion. Marcus turned off the television in a borrowed apartment, the room bare except for a folding chair and a cracked mirror. He said, "They still own my shadow," and felt the truth sharpen his jaw. Outside, the city buzzed, indifferent, its lights steady, its traffic blind. His name still pulsed, but not with cheers, only echoes. Naomi's choice rewrote the silence. She walked into a town hall and said, "I saw too much to stay quiet," and the crowd leaned forward. She told them about the ledgers, the transfers, the nights spent afraid of her own memory. Marcus, watching online, whispered, "You carried what I refused." The hall applauded not in frenzy, but in gratitude, a slow wave of hands joining. Ava said, "Truth belongs to those who risk it," and placed her statement in the public record. Dylan sat in the back row, his face shadowed, his silence thick. The story shifted, not into redemption, but into consequence told without fear. Marcus turned off the screen and pressed his palms together. He said, "The witness was never silent. I was." The echo carried longer than any cheer he once knew. The media returned, teeth sharper than before. A blogger said, "His silence means more scandals remain," and the words spread like oil. A podcast replayed secret recordings of teammates speaking in fragments. Headlines recycled images of Lena Hart leaving a restaurant, calling her complicit. Marcus walked through the city streets unnoticed, hoodie drawn, anonymity heavier than fame. He said, "I used to belong to everyone, now I belong to no one," and the truth both freed and caged him. Naomi warned, "They will never stop selling your name," and her voice sounded like both shield and curse. Ava said, "The record is closed, but the story never closes," and the words felt carved in stone. Dylan turned down an interview and stayed in silence. Marcus looked at a billboard where his face had once been, now blank, and whispered, "Better this way." Story closed not with redemption, but with revelation. Marcus stood before a mirror, the cracked glass holding pieces of a man. He said, "Enemies did not destroy me, I did." His breath fogged the surface, blurring the fragments into one shape. Naomi said, "You can still build something smaller, something true," though the words lived outside the room. Ava filed her last note and walked home into an unremarkable night. Dylan disappeared into cities where his name did not echo. Lena stayed a headline, her silence louder than denial. Marcus said, "I was once untouchable. Now I am only mine." He turned off the light, leaving the reflection to fade. The silence grew deep, heavy, unforgettable, and the sting of the final truth lingered. In the end, he was not destroyed by the world, but by himself.